Imagine trying to negotiate the trade-in value of like a used car, right?
Okay, yeah, which is stressful enough on its own.
Exactly. But imagine the Blue Book value is changing literally every 5 minutes.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a nightmare.
Right. And to make it worse, the dealer absolutely refuses to turn their computer monitor around.
So you're just completely flying blind.
Totally blind. You're sitting there, the clock is ticking, the dealer is, tapping their pen on the desk, and they are heavily pushing you to just sign the paperwork right now before the offer gets worse.
Yeah, that is a profoundly uncomfortable scenario to picture.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at the honestly pretty intimidating world of selling your personal items in a fluctuating market.
And specifically, how certain retail environments are deliberately engineered to make you panic.
Exactly. And that overwhelming engineered panic is exactly what our mission is to unpack today. We're exploring the philosophy of a specific buyer, NJ Diamonds, who has basically decided to completely reject that anxiety-driven business model.
Which is pretty rare, I mean, in that industry.
Very rare. We've got this stack of excerpts from the NJ Diamonds Gold Valuation Guide to work from.
It's a really fascinating document.
It really is. And, whether you've just inherited a box of old jewelry you don't know what to do with, or if you're just insanely curious about retail trust dynamics, this deep dive is for you.
Yeah, because it tells us so much about how businesses actually build a real reputation.
Right. We're going to figure out exactly what separates a trustworthy community institution from, well, a fly-by-night operation that's just trying to rush you out the door.
The contrast between those two models is incredibly stark.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have this material from NJ Diamonds, and I want to set some boundaries for our discussion right up front.
Sure, what are we focusing on?
We are going to focus entirely on the customer experience and the history detailed in the guide. We are completely skipping the math.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, no step-by-step valuation formulas today. We aren't getting into like how to weigh items or do chemical purity tests.
Right, because honestly, that's where people's eyes just glaze over anyway.
Exactly. We're looking strictly at the human element of the transaction.
Which is really where the most significant friction happens. The math is just numbers, but the actual transaction, that moment you part with something of value, is deeply psychological.
So, to understand why NJ Diamond's specific approach matters so much, we first have to understand the inherent stress of the market they operate in.
Right, the baseline anxiety.
Exactly. According to the guide's warnings, gold prices change daily. And not just daily, they fluctuate continuously throughout the day.
Right, it's a highly liquid commodity market.
So the literal monetary value of the physical item you're holding in your hand is in a state of constant motion.
Which is wild if you think about it. I mean, for a consumer used to walking into a grocery store where a gallon of milk costs the same at 9 a.m. as it does at 5 p.m.
Right, the stability we're used to.
Yeah, stepping into a liquid commodity market feels deeply disorienting. The rules of value are literally shifting while you're trying to make a decision.
And that disorientation is exactly what shady buyers prey on. The guide actually has a whole section warning about what most gold buyers don't tell you.
Oh, right. The tactics they use.
Yeah, it specifically calls out that some places use lower than market prices, they totally refuse to explain their methods, and worst of all, they actively rush customers into selling.
That rush factor is key.
Which brings me back to my used car analogy. The Blue Book value changing every 5 minutes, the monitor turned away.
It's a perfect comparison.
But I have to ask you, why is this rush tactic so incredibly prevalent in this specific industry? Why is forcing a fast transaction the go-to move?
Well, what's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of information asymmetry.
Information asymmetry, meaning like one person in the room holds all the cards and the other person is basically just guessing.
Precisely. In any transaction where the buyer has way more specialized knowledge than the seller, you get a massive imbalance of power.
Right, the dealer knows everything.
They know the current spot price, the market trends, their exact margins, and the customer. They usually know almost nothing.
Just that they have a gold ring.
Exactly. Now, take that inherent power imbalance and add extreme volatility to it.
Because the market changes throughout the day.
Right. Which, by the way, is exactly why phone quotes simply can't be given accurately.
Oh, because by the time you drive down there, the price is different.
Exactly. But shady buyers use that natural volatility as a psychological weapon. They manufacture artificial urgency.
So they spin the normal market fluctuation into a threat, like, uh-oh, the price is dropping as we speak, so you better take this cash right now.
That is the exact mechanism. If they can make you feel like the clock is ticking, They trigger your fight or flight response.
You literally panic.
You do. And when you're thrust into a state of anxiety, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles logic and critical thinking, it just starts to shut down.
Wow, so you stop evaluating the numbers completely.
You stop considering alternatives. You just want the deeply uncomfortable interaction to be over.
So the shady buyer forces a transaction before you even have the cognitive space to ask a question.
Or to just walk away.
Yeah.
The rush tactic isn't because the store is busy. It's a carefully calculated mechanism to exploit a shifting market.
The panic is the point. They want you off balance.
Absolutely.
Which honestly makes the pivot we see in the NJ Diamonds philosophy that much more striking.
Because they do the exact opposite.
Exactly. Because the baseline industry standard relies on anxiety, the source material explicitly positions NJ Diamond's philosophy as the exact opposite response to that stress.
They're actively choosing not to use the most effective manipulative tool in the industry.
Yeah, the guide states we do the opposite. They take the time to explain everything so the customer knows exactly what their items are worth.
Which is huge.
And then there's this one crucial line they emphasize: no pressure, no obligation to sell.
In an industry built on artificial urgency, saying there's no obligation to sell is actually a radical proposition.
So what does this all mean? Because, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
Isn't no pressure just kind of a standard marketing buzzword?
Sure, it gets used a lot.
Right. Every single used car lot has a giant no-pressure environment banner. Every mattress store claims you can just come in and relax.
True.
If I walk into a buyer's shop, I'm still just a regular person holding an item I don't understand, and they're still the expert holding the cash. How does taking the time to explain things actually change the power dynamic?
That is a very fair pushback. No pressure is thrown around constantly.
It feels empty.
Right, it's lost its meaning.
Right.
But if we look at the actual mechanics of what NJ Diamonds is doing, taking the time to explain the market fundamentally disrupts that information asymmetry we talked about.
It bridges the knowledge gap.
Exactly.
But how? How does taking time bridge that gap when the market itself is still bouncing all over the place?
Because in a volatile market, time is the ultimate currency of trust.
Oh, I like that. The ultimate currency of trust.
Think about the economics of it. If a business just wants a short-term extraction, getting your item for the absolute lowest price, their most valuable asset is speed.
They need you to say yes before you think.
Right. But when a buyer refuses to rush you, when they deliberately slow the whole process down to educate you on how the market is moving, they are actively dismantling that artificial urgency.
Giving your brain time to catch up.
Giving your prefrontal cortex time to re-engage. Exactly. They're removing the ticking clock from the room entirely.
Wow. And when they explicitly say there is no obligation to sell, they're handing the power back to the consumer.
Entirely. The psychological relief of knowing you can just pick up your items and walk out the front door without guilt or panic completely neutralizes the stress of those daily price fluctuations.
It turns a hostile negotiation into like a transparent consultation.
Exactly.
I really want to highlight what you said. Time is the ultimate currency of trust, because you really cannot fake taking your time with someone.
No, you can't.
You either sit there and answer their questions or you don't. A banner on a window is cheap, but an employee spending 30 minutes with someone who might just walk away.
But that costs real money. It requires immense patience.
And a willingness to lose a deal if the customer isn't ready.
Which most high-pressure places just can't afford to do. Taking time is an expensive, deliberate operational choice.
Which sets up our next major concept perfectly. Because, you can't just open a shop on a Tuesday, slap a transparent sticker on the door, and expect people to believe you.
Trust takes a long time to build.
Right. That kind of reputation requires a proven track record. Which brings us to their deep roots in their specific community.
And their track record is substantial.
It really is. The guide points out NJ Diamonds has been trusted in Dearborn for over 30 years. 3 decades of honest, transparent evaluations.
30 years is a long time in retail.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. The material explicitly notes that customers can walk in anytime during business hours, and absolutely no appointment is needed for a free evaluation.
That is a highly deliberate strategy, and it speaks volumes about their confidence.
I look at that, and I draw a direct connection between the 30-year history in Dearborn and this open door policy.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a business doesn't survive 3 decades in one local community by trapping people in rigid appointments or using shady tactics, right?
No, word gets around way too fast.
Right. If you burn people in your own backyard, your reputation is gone. 30 years means you're doing something right by your neighbors.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a 30-year local legacy is the ultimate proof of their no-pressure claim.
It's the receipts.
Exactly. It validates the whole strategy. In local retail, the cost of acquiring a new customer is high. If you rip someone off, you might win that one transaction, but you lose them forever.
And their friends and their family.
Right. You destroy your future revenue. But I think the appointment aspect is fascinating mechanically.
Yeah, how does a walk-in policy actually prove there's no pressure? Because lots of totally legitimate places require appointments.
Think about the psychology of an appointment for this specific, highly emotional transaction.
Okay.
An appointment demands a commitment. It says, carve out a block of your day exclusively for me.
Right, you're on their schedule.
And once you honor that appointment, drive down there and sit in the chair, there's an implicit pressure to follow through.
Oh, it's the sunk cost fallacy?
Exactly.
You feel like, well, I already drove here and spent an hour, I might as well leave with some cash.
Precisely. The appointment becomes psychological leverage for the buyer. But an open-door walk-in policy, that reflects immense confidence.
It says, come in when you're ready, leave when you want.
It removes the sunk cost fallacy entirely. It shows they view the Dearborn community through the lens of long-term relationships, not one-off extractions.
Because after 30 years, your customers are just your neighbors.
They're the people you see at the grocery store. A strong local community acts like an immune system against predatory practices.
They'll starve out the bad actors.
Exactly. You simply cannot fake a 30-year reputation.
That makes perfect sense. The longevity is the evidence that the philosophy is real. So to bring this all together, navigating these fluctuating markets where the value of what you're holding changes by the hour requires finding a trusted partner.
You really can't navigate it alone.
Right. And for NJ Diamonds, that trust is built on a 30-year foundation in Dearborn. It's maintained by a strict adherence to a pressure-free environment with zero obligation.
And a commitment to taking the time to explain the market rather than rushing you.
Exactly. And to you listening, this is why understanding this matters. Whether you're dealing with jewelry or any other high-value asset, the environment you step into is critical.
Just as important as the commodity itself.
Right. The local reputation and transparency of the buyer dictate the true value of the transaction. If they're hiding the monitor and tapping their watch, you're already losing.
Which actually raises an interesting final thought to consider.
Ooh.
Well, we know from the guide that gold prices change so frequently that fund quotes are impossible. The literal monetary value of these possessions is in a constant state of flux.
Right. The ground is always moving under your feet.
So if the actual cash value of our possessions is always inherently unstable, does a business's true value lie not in the stack of cash they hand over, but in the psychological peace of mind they provide by simply letting us walk away without pressure?
Oh, wow. So you're almost paying for the peace of mind knowing you aren't being manipulated.
Exactly. When the target you're aiming for is always moving, the absolute most valuable thing someone can offer you is the space to take a breath and decide if you even want to play the game today.
That is an incredibly powerful way to look at it. Trust is the freedom to walk away. Well, thank you for taking this journey into the mechanics of trust with us today. Keep your eyes open, value your time, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.